Imagine the smell first, because that's what hit you before anything else. Not gunpowder or leather or whiskey, but the thick, copper stench of blood mixing with dust under a merciless sun, while children laugh and bite into sandwiches their mothers packed that morning. Picture 1,000 people gathered in a town square that barely deserves the name, most of them grinning, all of them waiting for a man's neck to snap like a dry twig. This wasn't some medieval torture chamber hidden in a dungeon. This was America, barely a century and a half ago, where justice wore a noose like jewelry and communities treated executions like county fairs. Welcome to the Wild West, where punishment wasn't just about making criminals pay. It was about making sure everyone else got a good, long look at what happens when you step out of line. And trust me, what they did to lawbreakers makes modern prison look like a spa vacation. The thing about frontier justice is that it moved faster than a bullet and hit just as hard. Before there were proper courthouses with their marble columns and gavels and all that theatrical nonsense, justice happened on wagon trains rolling west through territories so empty that God himself seemed to have abandoned them. These traveling circuses of civilization elected their own judges in juries from whoever happened to be heading to California or Oregon that season. Maybe your judge was a former shopkeeper from Ohio. Maybe your jury foreman sold ribbon back in Pennsylvania. Didn't matter. They had the authority to hang you, whip you, or brand you like cattle, and they'd do it before the sun set if they felt like it. In 1859, a man named John Stoffel made the fatal mistake of murdering his brother-in-law over some gold dust in Denver, a settlement that barely qualified as a town with only 150 buildings to its name. Within 48 hours, they tried him, convicted him, built a gallows, and strung him up in front of 1,000 spectators who showed up like it was opening night at the theater. 48 hours? Most of us take longer to decide what to watch on streaming services. But here's where it gets really delicious in its brutality. The courts weren't just fast, they were creative. Take Isaac C. Parker, the man they called the hanging judge, though I'm sure he had other hobbies besides wholesale execution. During his 21 years presiding over Fort Smith, Arkansas, this charming fellow sentenced 160 men to death by hanging. Now, only 79 actually got the drop, which I suppose makes him merciful by frontier standards. But still, that's nearly 4 hangings a year for 2 decades. The man had a routine. He probably had a favorite breakfast he ate on hanging days. These weren't trials in any modern sense. They were more like theatrical performances where everyone already knew the ending. The accused would stand there in chains while emigrants formed semicircles around them, mimicking the courtrooms they remembered from back east, as if geometry could somehow make frontier murder trials more civilized. For minor crimes, you might get mediation, which sounds almost reasonable until you realize that more violent crimes earned you a public whipping that would leave your back looking like raw meat hung in a butcher's window. The speed wasn't just about efficiency, it was about terror. Justice needed to be immediate and visible, because in territories spanning thousands of miles, with maybe 1 sheriff per 100 square miles if you were lucky, the only thing keeping people from descending into complete chaos was the fear of what would happen if they got caught. And what would happen was spectacular in its cruelty. See, the frontier had a problem that medieval Europe never faced: space. In Europe, you could lock someone in a dungeon and forget about them because dungeons were right there, built into every castle and church basement. But out west, there were no dungeons, no prisons, barely any jails worth mentioning. So punishment had to be immediate, public, and most importantly, permanent. You couldn't just slap someone on the wrist and send them on their way because they ride off into the sunset and you never see them again. No, you needed to make sure that wherever they went, whatever new settlement they wandered into, everyone would know immediately what they'd done. That's where branding comes in. And oh, what a delightfully sadistic solution to a logistical problem. The same hot irons used to mark cattle ownership got repurposed for human flesh, because apparently The frontier settlers looked at their livestock management techniques and thought, you know what? This would work great on people too. In 1790, at Jonesboro, Tennessee, two men named John Wilson and Joseph Folsom learned this lesson the hard way when they decided horse stealing was a viable career choice. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. They got locked in the pillory, that lovely medieval device that holds your head and hands in place so you can't and dodge what is coming, and received 39 lashes that turned their backs into abstract art painted in blood and torn flesh. But that was just the opening act. The main event involved heating up branding irons until they glowed red, then pressing them against their right cheeks to burn in the letter H and their left cheeks for the letter T, horse thief, forever. No amount of beard growth or hack wearing could hide those marks. Every person they met for the rest of their lives would see those letters and know exactly what they'd done, and more importantly, would know not to leave them alone with anything that had four legs and a saddle. The beauty of branding, if we can call it that, was its efficiency. One hot iron, 10 seconds of screaming, and you've created a walking advertisement for law and order that requires no maintenance and lasts a lifetime. Courts handed out these permanent modifications with the casual frequency of parking tickets. In 1640, Virginia courts branded a runaway slave with the letter R on their cheek, because nothing says property rights quite like searing identification into human skin. Thieves got a T on their forehead or hand, a practice that makes you wonder how anyone with that letter in their name felt about the whole arrangement. Some settlements reserved branding for repeat offenders, building up a criminal resume right on someone's face like the world's worst resume. First offense, maybe you just got whipped. Second offense, that's when out came the iron. The psychological damage probably exceeded the physical trauma, though both were considerable. Try building a new life when your past is literally written on your face in scar tissue. Try convincing anyone you've changed when they can see evidence of your crimes every time they look at you. The brand served as punishment, prevention, and prophecy all at once. A trifecta of cruelty that ensured branded criminals remained criminals forever. Because what legitimate work could you possibly get with H and T burned into your cheeks? But if you thought branding was bad, let's talk about the whipping post, that charming fixture of frontier town squares. The English settlers who colonized America brought their language, their religion, their recipes, and their enthusiastic love of flogging people in public. The whipping post stood prominently, usually near the courthouse or on the common, a wooden pillar that existed for the sole purpose of tying people to it so they could be beaten like dusty rugs. The instruments varied depending on local preference and how creative the authorities felt that day. Simple leather whips did the job, but lacked flair. The cat-o'-nine tails, now that was a proper torture device. A handle with 9 separate leather thongs, sometimes knotted, sometimes tipped with metal, designed to transform a human back into something resembling ground meat, which is the kind of understatement that makes you wonder what would have qualified as excessive in his mind. That number 39 appeared again and again in Frontier. Punishment, a biblical reference to the 40 stripes mentioned in Scripture -1 to avoid accidentally killing someone, because apparently killing people slowly through infection and shock was fine. But accidentally giving them that 40th lash would have been unseemly. Frontier communities whipped people for everything. Public drunkenness, brawling, theft, assault, looking at someone wrong on a Tuesday. On wagon trains heading west, they'd strip the accused naked in front of their traveling companions, families they'd been living alongside for months, and flog them while everyone watched. The children watched. The wives watched. Everyone watched, because that was the point. The humiliation was part of the punishment, maybe the most important part. It keeps you in line. And if it didn't keep you in line, well, at least it entertained everyone else and reminded them not to make the same mistakes you did. Then we arrive at the main event, the crown jewel of frontier justice, the spectacle that brought out absolutely everyone, the hanging. These weren't quiet affairs conducted in prison yards at dawn. These were public festivals, social gatherings, where thousands of people showed up with their children and their picnic baskets to watch a human being dangle and die. During the Wild West period, missing a hanging was like missing Christmas. You just didn't do it. The territorial governments spent serious money on these events. An 1849 invoice from Santa Fe County showing costs exceeding $110, equivalent to over $4,500 today, for lumber, rope, coffins, and labor. They built proper scaffolds, hired professional executioners, and treated the whole thing with the solemnity of a religious ceremony, which I suppose it was in its own twisted way. Professional hangmen took pride in their craft, and none more so than George Maladon, who styled himself the Prince of Hangmen, a title that really makes you question what constitutes royalty on the frontier. This man had specifications: rope 1.5 inches thick, soaked in water and air-dried before being tallowed or soaked to soften it, because apparently a rough rope was inhumane, but hanging someone wasn't. Over 2 decades, he oversaw at least 60 executions, which means this man spent roughly 1 day every 4 months killing people, and presumably spent the rest of his time doing whatever hangmen do on their days off. The technique became refined to an art form, with formulas for clean hangings that placed the noose knot on the left side of the prisoner, thus neck to render them unconscious quickly, as if there's a humane way to strangle someone to death with their own body weight. The condemned got to say final words, which ranged from defiant to pathetic to philosophical. In 1851, of 5 Cayuse Native Americans hanged in Oregon, Territory asked whether missionaries hadn't taught them that Christ died to save his people, a question that probably made everyone uncomfortable for about 5 seconds before they pulled the lever anyway. Doctors attended these executions to confirm death, though sometimes their expertise wasn't necessary, as in the case of Black Jack Ketchum in 1901, whose hanging went so catastrophically wrong that his head separated from his body, turning an execution into an accidental decapitation and presumably giving everyone in attendance a story they'd tell for the rest of their lives. But even botched hangings served a purpose. They reminded everyone that this could happen to them, that the community would gather and watch, and probably bring sandwiches that justice on the frontier was swift and brutal, and absolutely did not care about your dignity or your comfort, or whether you really meant to steal that horse or not. The scaffold stood as a monument to order imposed through terror, civilization built on the cracking of vertebrae, and the message was clear: step out of line, and we, LL, make your death into entertainment for the whole family.